Imagine this, an ancient queen, draped in silk, standing beside the very man who murdered her husband. The torches burn bright, but her eyes burn brighter still, with rage she dares not show. Tonight she will wed her half-brother, not for love, but for survival. What follows is a story of betrayal, blood, and the cunning of a woman who would one day be called the Serpent Queen. Section 1. Picture this: you are standing in the torchlit corridors of a marble palace in the city of Halicarnassus, the Aegean jewel of a kingdom already tearing itself apart. The air is heavy with incense, the bitter tang of frankincense, and crushed myrrh clinging to the vaulted ceilings. Beneath the glinting bronze braziers, the nobles of Korea are gathering in their finest robes of crimson and blue, their jeweled belts flashing in the light like coiled snakes. They have come to celebrate what they believe is a triumph for their kingdom, a marriage that will secure its future, bind its rulers in sacred union, and silence whispers of rebellion. But not all eyes are joyful. At the heart of the hall stands Althea of Korea, daughter of King Menandros, her face pale as ivory. She is robed in white linen and bound with a golden girdle that marks her as queen. Her dark hair gleams beneath the weight of the diadem placed upon her brow, a crown that feels less like honor and more like iron shackles. At her side stands Damon, her half-brother, newly crowned king of Korea, his hand heavy on her waist. His grip is too tight, the nails of his fingers pressing into her flesh as if to remind her, and everyone watching, that she is not wife but property. Damon smiles, his eyes glittering with a hunger that makes the gathered nobles avert their gaze. They call him the Falcon, for his ruthless swiftness in striking down rivals. Only months earlier, he had slain his elder brother and seized the throne, leaving the royal court soaked in blood. He had sworn to Althea that her children from her first marriage would be safe if she agreed to marry him. He had sworn to honor them as his heirs. Yet even as the priest chants the sacred invocations to Hera and Zeus, Althea feels the chill certainty in her bones: Damon's promises are nothing but smoke. Her 3 sons stand at the edge of the crowd. 2 are restless boys, too young to understand the danger that coils like a viper around them. The eldest, Thien, is nearly a man. His gaze never leaves Damon, and there is a fire in his eyes that reminds Althea painfully of her first husband, the king Damon murdered to steal the throne. She knows that fire is what makes her son strong, but she also knows it may get him killed. The priest raises a cup of wine, its surface dark as blood. The ceremony proceeds, words echoing in Greek and Carian alike, blessing this marriage not as an abomination but as a sacred bond. The nobles cheer, but behind the cheer there is tension, unease. They pretend not to see the way Althea's smile does not reach her eyes. They pretend not to hear the bitterness in her voice as she answers the vows. Tonight she will sleep beside a man who views her as a pawn, her sons as obstacles, her life as collateral. But she has survived too much already to surrender now. She swallows her rage like bitter wine and vows silently, if Damon believes he has tamed me, he will soon learn that serpents are most dangerous when cornered. Section 2. The banquet begins, a dazzling spectacle meant to bury the scent of treachery beneath waves of wine and honeyed words. Long tables stretch across the hall, laden with roasted lamb, fish pulled fresh from the Aegean, and baskets of figs glistening with dew. Musicians pluck lyres while flute players weave melodies that twine through the laughter of courtiers. Yet the sound to Althea is hollow, each note ringing false in her ears. Damon raises his cup, his voice carrying over the clamor. To unity. To the blood of Menandros, pure and unbroken. To the gods who watch over us. And to my queen, my sister, my wife, the jewel of Korea. A cheer erupts, though not all voices join with equal fervor. Althea lifts her cup with measured grace, but she does not drink. She watches her sons instead, their faces caught in the glow of oil lamps. Thien sits stiffly, lips pressed in. He does not eat. He does not drink. His silence is a blade sharper than any sword, and Althea's heart clenches at the thought of how Damon will interpret it. Damon notices, of course. He always notices. He leans toward her, his breath warm against her ear. Your boy stares at me as though he dreams of sliding a dagger into my heart. Damon's smile never wavers, though his voice is low and venomous. I should remove such defiance before it festers. Althea turns her head, her eyes catching the torchlight. If you strike him, Damon, you may win a moment's peace, but you will lose the loyalty of every noble who ever bent knee to my father. Do you wish your first act as husband to be your last as king? For a heartbeat, silence lingers between them, heavy as stone. Then Damon chuckles, loud enough for the nearest nobles to hear. He kisses her temple with mock tenderness. Always sharp, my queen. Very well. The boy lives, for now. Althea hides the tremor in her hands beneath folds of linen. She forces her lips into a smile, even as bow rises in her throat. She has played this game before, when her father sent her as a bride to an ally old enough to be her grandfather. She has worn the mask of obedience, feigned docility while her mind worked in silence. Damon thinks himself a falcon, swift and merciless. But falcons do not see serpents until they strike. As the feast dwindles into drunken song, Althea excuses herself. She moves through the palace corridors she once roamed as a child. The marble is the same, the torches burn as they always have, but everything else has changed. Shadows whisper of betrayal. The painted frescoes seem to sneer. Her sons wait in her chamber. Theon rises as she enters, his voice urgent. Mother, we must leave this place. He will kill us. You know it. I know, she whispers, closing the doors. She gathers her sons close, breathing in their scent, committing the moment to memory. But to flee tonight would be to die tonight. Damon has soldiers at every gate. We must endure, my loves. Endure until I find the opening we need. Theon clenches his fists. I will not bow to him. I will not call him father. You must call him whatever he demands, Althea says, her tone firm though her heart aches. Call him king. Call him lord. Call him father if you must. Words are nothing. Survival is everything. Theon's eyes blaze, but he nods reluctantly. He is his mother's son, proud, stubborn, but capable of patience when survival demands it. Althea looks at each of them in turn, her voice low, steady, filled with steel. Listen to me. Damon thinks he has trapped us, but he underestimates what a woman can do when cornered. I will protect you. I swear it by the blood of our ancestors and the gods who hear me now. No matter the cost, I will protect you. Outside, the revelry echoes on. Inside, Althea begins to weave her web. Section 3. The night after the wedding was suffocating. The palace, usually filled with the quiet hum of servants and the shuffle of guards, seemed alive with unseen eyes. The torches outside Althea's chambers flickered in unnatural patterns, their shadows stretching like skeletal fingers across the walls. Sleep would not come. Damon arrived late, his steps echoing in the marble corridor before the bronze doors swung open. He reeked of wine and roasted meat, his tunic half open, his golden circlet tilted carelessly on his brow. He dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand and entered, his smile cruel. My queen, he purred, drawing out the word like an insult. You have the air of a caged bird tonight. Have you forgotten? The cage is gilded. Althea sat by the window, the moonlight silvering her linen robe. She kept her face impassive, though her pulse quickened as he crossed the room. I have forgotten nothing, she said softly. I remember every promise you made. Damon tilted his head, studying her. Ah, yes, the promises. To protect your sons. To raise them as heirs. I meant them, of course. His grin widened. So long as they prove themselves loyal. You know children, Althea replied, her voice controlled though her fingers tightened around the window ledge. They are proud. But they will bend. They will learn. Damon's hand shot out, gripping her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. His fingers were rough, his nails biting into her skin. If they do not learn quickly, Althea, then I will teach them in my own way. Althea's heart thundered, but she did not flinch. She had learned long ago that weakness was blood in the water to men like him. And if you do, she whispered, her gaze steady. You will find yourself alone. A king without heirs, without allies, without even the gods to bless you. Tell me, Damon, do you truly believe Korea will follow a butcher who slays his own blood? For a moment his eyes darkened, as if he might strike her. Then, abruptly, he laughed, releasing her chin. You are a serpent, sister. A serpent with honey on its tongue. Very well. I will spare the cubs for now. But make no mistake, my mercy is as thin as your patience. He left her then, his heavy footfalls echoing into silence. Althea exhaled, long and trembling, her nails digging crescent moons into the stone windowsill. When the door shut, she rose and went to the hidden alcove where her sons slept. She brushed her fingers across Theon's brow, whispering so softly even the walls could not hear. Do not provoke him, my son. Let him think himself master. Every tyrant blinds himself with arrogance, and when he cannot see the dagger, we will strike. The days that followed blurred into a cycle of tension and vigilance. Damon summoned Theon often, testing him with questions about loyalty, pressing him to call him father. The boy obeyed in word but not in spirit, his eyes always defiant. Damon noticed. Damon always noticed. At court, the nobles whispered. Some still remembered Althea's first husband, the rightful king, slain by Damon's ambition. Their glances were sharp, measuring. They saw in Theon a glimmer of the past, in Althea a queen too proud to bow. Some might be allies if approached with care. But Althea knew better than to trust too quickly. In a court where betrayal was a currency, loyalty could vanish with the turn of a coin. One evening, as the court dined, a noblewoman of age and sharp wit, Lady Nyssa, slipped beside Althea. Her voice was low, her gaze fixed on the dancers in the hall. Your sons are in danger, Nyssa murmured, her bracelets chiming faintly as she leaned closer. Damon speaks of them when he is drunk. He says the throne cannot bear too many claimants. He will act soon. Althea's stomach turned to stone, though her face betrayed nothing. She sipped her wine, her lips curving faintly. And what do you suggest, Lady Nyssa? Nyssa's eyes flicked to her, sharp as daggers. Survive. And remember, falcons grow careless when they believe their prey is trapped. Althea inclined her head, as though to a friend. But in her heart, the serpent within coiled tighter. Damon was circling, but so was she. Section 4. The palace of Halicarnassus had always been a place of splendor. Marble floors polished until they gleamed like water, frescoes of gods and heroes painted across vaulted ceilings, gardens filled with roses and fountains that whispered secrets in the dark. But for Althea, it had become a prison lined with gold. Every corridor seemed to echo with Damon's laughter, every chamber a reminder of her son's peril. It was during one of the evening symposia, those endless nights of wine and philosophy Damon adored, that Althea began to see the shape of her survival. Damon was drunk, as usual, reclining on a couch while poets recited verses comparing him to Zeus the Thunderer. The courtiers laughed too loudly, their applause more for survival than admiration. Althea sat at his side, her expression serene, but her eyes wandered the room. She noticed who cheered with sincerity, and who cheered because they must. She noted the noblemen who avoided looking at her sons, as though fearing their fates might reflect upon them. And she noticed Lady Nyssa, watching her with the faintest nod, a signal so subtle it might have been missed by anyone but Althea. Later that night, when Damon staggered away to his chambers, Althea lingered in the gardens. The moon was nearly full, the air heavy with the perfume of night-blooming jasmine. Nyssa joined her, moving silently as a shadow. You must act quickly, Nyssa whispered. I have served this court for 40 years, and I know the pattern. Damon sharpens his knives on whispers before he strikes with steel. He will not wait long. Althea's heart clenched. And yet you come to me. Why? Loyalty to a dead king? Or hatred for the living one? Nyssa's lips curved in a thin smile. Hatred is a kind of loyalty, my queen. Damon killed my grandson to secure his throne. Do you think I will forget that? The serpent in Althea stirred. Here was a potential ally, Bitter, sharp, and with nothing left to lose. Dangerous, yes, but perhaps useful. What do you propose? Althea asked, her voice low. Survive, Nyssa said. And make your sons survive. I can give you messages carried beyond these walls. There are men in Rhodes, in Athens, who still remember your father Menandros with respect. If they knew you lived, if they knew Damon plotted against the rightful heirs, they would act. Althea's pulse quickened. A lifeline, fragile as spider silk, but real. She nodded slowly. Do it. Reach them. But be careful, Nyssa. Damon smells treachery as hounds smell blood. The older woman's eyes gleamed. So do I. That night, Althea returned to her son's chamber. Theon was awake, sitting upright on his bed, staring at the flickering lamp. You spoke with Lady Nyssa, he said, his tone more statement than question. Althea sat beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his brow. You watch too closely, my son. I must, he replied. Damon watches me. His jaw tightened. I can fight him, mother. I am not a boy anymore. Give me a blade, and I'll. No. Althea cut him off, her voice sharp. Listen to me, Theon. You will not fight him. Not now. Do you understand? To act rashly is to die, and to die is to lose everything. We must wait. We must learn. The falcon is swift, yes, but the serpent strikes unseen. Theon lowered his gaze, though defiance burned in his eyes. He was his father's son, too proud, too ready to leap. But he was also hers, and he would learn patience if it killed her to teach it. Althea lay awake long after her sons slept. She stared at the ceiling, the painted gods looking down as though mocking her. In her mind, she weighed the impossible, Damon's suspicion, Nyssa's offer, her son's survival. And slowly, a plan began to coil together in the dark. Section 5. The plan began not with swords or rebellion but with whispers and gestures, the subtle threads of intrigue that wove the fabric of survival in every royal court. Althea understood that Damon's throne was strong only so long as his nobles feared him. Fear, however, was brittle. It cracked when pushed too hard, when men began to realize they had more to gain by defying a tyrant than bowing to him. Each morning, Althea walked the palace gardens with her sons at her side. Outwardly, she played the part of the dutiful queen, smiling for the guards who trailed behind, nodding graciously to the courtiers who bowed as they passed. But beneath the calm mask she watched. She noted which guards stiffened when Damon's name was mentioned, which servants whispered too long in corners, which nobles lingered in her presence with questions cloaked in politeness. One morning, as they passed beneath the shade of cypress trees, a young officer named Callisthenes bowed low. He was no older than Theon, his face unlined, his armor polished to gleaming. "My queen," he said softly as she approached. "May the gods keep you safe." His eyes flickered briefly to Theon, then back to her. "And your sons as well." It was nothing, a polite blessing, the kind uttered countless times in palaces across the Aegean. But the way he spoke it, the weight in his voice, told Althea everything. Here was another crack in Damon's armor. That night Althea whispered to her eldest son, "Do you see how they watch? Damon rules with steel, but men tire of bleeding. We must give them reason to bleed for us instead." Theon frowned, restless. "And when? How long must we hide behind silence?" "Until he believes us weak," she said. "Until he closes his eyes." A knock came at her chamber door. When it opened, Lady Nyssa entered, cloaked in shadows. She carried a bundle of scrolls hidden beneath her shawl. "The letters are sent," she murmured, placing them on the table. "To Rhodes, to Athens, to Byzantium. By the time Damon knows, the messengers will be beyond his reach." Althea's hand trembled slightly as she touched the scrolls. Hope was a dangerous luxury, yet it filled her chest all the same. "And their answer?" Nyssa's eyes narrowed. "That depends on you. They will not rise for words alone. They must see that Damon bleeds." Althea understood. She always understood. "Then he will bleed." The first opportunity came sooner than she expected. Damon had ordered a public procession through the city to display his strength. He sat in a golden chariot, the diadem gleaming on his brow, while soldiers marched behind in bronze ranks. Althea was forced to ride beside him, her sons following on horseback. The people cheered, but the sound lacked fervor. Too many eyes glanced at her instead of him. Too many voices whispered her name, as though it carried promise. As the procession wound through the market square, a commotion broke out. A beggar, ragged and wild-eyed, stumbled forward, shouting curses at Damon. "Murderer!" the man screamed. "Usurper!" Guards leapt to seize him, but the word had already spread. A ripple of murmurs coursed through the crowd. Damon's face flushed crimson as he barked orders to have the man dragged away, his voice shaking with fury. Althea kept her gaze forward, her expression serene. Inside, her heart raced. She had not planned this, yet it was a gift. A single voice daring to speak what all thought. Damon could kill the man, but he could not kill the whispers. That night, Damon stormed into her chamber, his eyes burning. "Did you see? Did you hear? They dare to mock me, while you sit silent." Althea rose slowly, her robe trailing like smoke across the floor. "If they mock you, husband, it is because they fear you less than you think. Perhaps you should ask yourself why." His hand shot out as though to strike her. For a heartbeat, Althea braced for the blow. But Damon stopped, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on hers. Slowly, his hand lowered. "Careful, serpent!" he hissed. "Careful!" He left her standing in silence, the echo of his rage still trembling through the room. And Althea thought, yes, Damon. Be careful. For the serpent waits in silence, but when it strikes to kill. Section 6. The weeks after the procession were thick with unease. Damon's temper grew shorter, his suspicion sharper. He prowled the palace like a predator, demanding reports from his guards, punishing servants for imagined slights. To outsiders, it seemed the king ruled with iron certainty. But Althea, who had learned to read every twitch of his mouth, every flicker in his eyes, saw the truth. Damon was afraid. Fear made him dangerous. One morning, as Althea entered the throne hall for council, she found her two youngest sons already there, flanked by guards. Damon sat on the throne, lounging with false ease, a goblet of wine in hand. His eyes glinted as he beckoned her forward. "My queen," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I have summoned your sons to speak of loyalty. They will take their oaths today, before the court." Althea's blood ran cold. Oaths forced under Damon's watch were chains he would later twist into nooses. She glanced quickly at Theon, who stood tense near the edge of the dais. His fists were clenched, his jaw tight. "Children," Damon continued, raising the goblet as though in a toast, "step forward and swear to honor your king as your father, your protector, your god on earth." The younger boys hesitated, glancing at their mother. She gave the faintest nod, her face serene. With trembling voices, they repeated the words Damon fed them. Damon's smile widened like a wolf's grin. Then his gaze shifted to Theon. "And you, eldest? Come! Speak your vow." Theon did not move. He stood rigid, his eyes locked on Damon's, his silence louder than any insult. Murmurs rippled through the court. Damon's fingers tightened around the goblet until wine sloshed down the side. Althea's heart pounded. She could not let this end in blood. She stepped forward, her voice clear, smooth, unwavering. "My lord," she said, inclining her head, "forgive my son. His silence is not defiance but reverence. Words are fleeting, but loyalty is proven in deeds. Let him show you his devotion through service in your army. What better way to bind him to you than to place a sword in his hand for Korea?" The court murmured again, but this time differently. A clever turn, they thought. A delay? Damon's eyes narrowed, weighing her words. At last, he barked a laugh, though it was sharp and humorless. "Very well, my queen. The boy will serve." He leaned forward, his gaze like a blade against Theon. "But hear me, whelp. In war there is no silence, only blood. If you will not swear with words, you will swear with your life on the battlefield. And if you fail me, not even your mother's serpent tongue will save you. The council dispersed in uneasy silence. Althea gathered her sons quickly, ushering them back to their chambers. As the doors shut behind them, Theon erupted. You would send me to him? To fight under his banner? You would have me bend. I would have you live. Althea snapped, her voice sharp enough to still him. Do you not see, Theon? He wants your blood. He will have it, if you give him excuse. This way, we buy time. We make him believe you can be shaped, even as we sharpen our own blades in secret. Theon's chest heaved, his fists trembling at his sides. Slowly, he sank onto the bench, his face buried in his hands. Althea knelt beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. My son, she whispered, her voice soft again. The falcon hunts in the open sky. But we are serpents. We strike from the shadows. We wait. Do not give him reason to kill you before we are ready. Theon did not answer, but his silence was no longer defiant, it was heavy, resigned, like steel being tempered by fire. Althea straightened, her mind racing. Damon thought he had won. He thought Theon would fight for him, bleed for him. But she would find a way to turn that demand into a weapon. If Damon wanted her son in his army, then perhaps Damon's army itself could be turned against him. The serpent's web was not yet finished, but the threads were tightening. Section 7. Spring came to Halicarnassus with the scent of salt on the wind and war in the air. Damon, restless as always, found a new excuse to stretch his claws: raids by Lycians along the southern coast. It was a minor threat, hardly worth a king's personal attention, but Damon hungered for blood and glory. He declared he would march at the head of his army, crushing the raiders and proving once again that Korea's throne belonged to him alone. The court prepared feverishly. Armor was polished, provisions gathered, sacrifices offered in the temples. The people lined the streets to watch the soldiers drill, their bronze helmets gleaming beneath the sun. Damon reveled in the spectacle, striding through the ranks like a conqueror reborn. Althea, forced to stand at his side, smiled and clapped as custom demanded. But within her breast, her heart beat like a drum. Damon's departure meant opportunity. For the first time since her unwanted marriage, the falcon would fly from the nest. And when he did, the serpent would strike. Theon was summoned to ride with the army. Damon made a show of it, placing a spear in the boy's hand before the assembled court. See, people of Korea! Damon shouted, his voice booming across the square. Theon, son of Menandros, fights now for me, his king and his father. Blood binds us stronger than words. The people cheered, though uneasily. Althea stood with her younger sons, her face calm though her fingers dug crescents into her palms. She met Theon's eyes as he mounted his horse. He said nothing, but she saw the promise burning there. He would endure. For her. For his brothers. For the chance of freedom. That night, as the army camped beyond the city walls, Althea moved through the palace corridors in silence. The guards were fewer, their loyalties divided now that Damon had stripped the palace of many to serve in his campaign. Lady Nyssa met her in the gardens, shrouded in a dark cloak. It is time, Nyssa said, pressing a sealed letter into her hand. Athens replies. They will support you if you can weaken Damon. Rhodes too, though their price will be silver. Byzantium remains cautious. Althea broke the seal, scanning the words by lamplight. The reply was cautious but real. We cannot march against Damon openly. But if his power falters, if Korea rises against him, we will send ships. Ships. Soldiers. Allies. The promise made her breath catch. And the nobles here? Althea asked. Nyssa's smile was like a knife. More than you think. Damon rules through fear, and fear makes men eager to betray. They wait only for you to give the signal. Althea closed her eyes, drawing in the scent of jasmine and the sea. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of possibility pressing heavier than despair. But possibility was not certainty. Damon was cunning, and his spies were everywhere. She could not move too quickly, could not expose her hand before the time was ripe. She opened her eyes, her voice firm. Then we wait. Let Damon fight his lichens. Let him think the falcon soars higher than all. And when he is far from home, we strike at his nest. Nyssa bowed her head. The serpent coils. Yes, Althea whispered, her gaze fixed on the moon above. And soon, it will strike. Back in her chamber, she sat with her younger sons, holding them close as they drifted to sleep. Her thoughts were with Theon in the army camp, surrounded by Damon's loyalists, walking the knife's edge between survival and death. She whispered a prayer into the darkness, half to the gods, half to herself. Hold on, my son. Hold on a little longer. For the hour of reckoning comes. Section 8. The army marched at dawn, their bronze shields flashing in the rising sun, their spears glinting like a forest of silvered pines. Theon rode among them, the weight of his armor pressing down on his young shoulders. He had trained, yes, but never like this. Never in the endless heat of a campaign, never with Damon's gaze burning into his back like a torch held too close to flesh. The falcon rode at the front, his scarlet cloak streaming behind him, his voice booming across the columns. Curia marches as one. No foe can stand before us. No traitor can hide among us. The gods themselves ride in our ranks. The soldiers roared their approval, though Theon heard the weariness beneath it, the hollowness of men cheering not from love but from fear. He clenched his spear tighter. Every step of his horse carried him deeper into Damon's shadow, yet he remembered his mother's words: survive, endure, wait. The campaign was swift and brutal. The Lycians had raided lightly, expecting little retaliation. Damon's army descended like a storm, burning villages, scattering warriors, stringing up captives as warnings. Damon reveled in the slaughter, riding down fleeing foes himself, his laughter sharp as steel. For Theon, it was something else. He killed his first man in a skirmish near the coast, a boy no older than himself, eyes wide with terror as Theon's spear pierced his chest. The sound haunted him long after the battle ended, echoing in his ears even as the soldiers feasted on stolen bread and wine. That night, as the fires crackled around the camp, Damon summoned him. Theon entered the king's tent, the air heavy with the smell of roasted meat and spilled wine. Damon lounged on a couch, a dagger spinning idly between his fingers. Well, whelp, Damon said, his eyes glittering. You have tasted blood. How does it feel? Theon swallowed hard. Necessary, he answered carefully. Damon barked a laugh. Necessary! Gods, you have your mother's tongue. Always so careful, so slippery. His gaze sharpened. But tell me truth, when the blood spilled, did you not feel the fire? Did you not feel like a god among men? Theon hesitated, the image of the boy's dying eyes searing in his mind. I felt alive, he said at last. Damon's smile spread. Good. That is the truth. Killing is life. Power. Remember that, and perhaps you will live long enough to matter. He leaned forward suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. But do not forget, boy, your life is mine. Your sword, your blood, your breath. All mine. Betray me, and I will see your brother's throats slit before your eyes. Theon's stomach turned to ice. He bowed stiffly. Yes, my king. Damon watched him leave, laughter trailing behind like smoke. Far away in Halicarnassus, Althea's web thickened. With Damon gone, she became the heart of the palace. She held councils in his absence, her voice soft but steady, reminding the nobles of her father's legacy, her late husband's honor. She walked among the people, her sons at her side, receiving prayers and petitions. Slowly, carefully, she let them see her not just as queen but as their protector against Damon's cruelty. At night, she met with Nyssa and her small circle of loyalists. They spoke in whispers, bent over maps and letters, planning for the day Damon's absence grew too long, his grip too weak. Strike at the heart when he is farthest from the city, Nyssa urged. The army's loyalty is his strength. Cut him from it, and he is nothing but a tyrant in a gilded cage. Althea traced her finger along the map of Korea. Damon's campaign stretched him thin, pushing deeper into Lycian lands. She could feel the threads tightening. Soon. Not yet, but soon. She thought of Theon, imagined him in the dust and blood of Damon's war, and whispered again the promise she had made: "Survive, my son. Just a little longer." The serpent waits. Section 9. The serpent strikes. Damon's war dragged on through summer. Theon endured every test his half-uncle devised: reckless charges, impossible watch duties, constant taunts meant to break him. Yet he remembered his mother's words. He bent, but he did not break. He played the obedient soldier, hiding the hatred that burned in his chest like a coal. Back in Halicarnassus, Althea's influence blossomed. She presided over councils with calm authority, dispensed justice with fairness Damon had never shown, and walked the markets without a phalanx of guards. The people whispered her name as they once whispered her father's. A queen, yes, but also a mother, a protector, a serpent waiting to strike. By autumn, Damon had stretched his army thin, pursuing victories deep in Lycian hills. That was when the letters arrived from Rhodes and Athens: "The ships are ready. The silver you promised has been delivered. When you rise, we will rise with you." Nyssa placed the letters on the table, her eyes alight. "The moment is here, my queen. One strike, and Damon's cage will snap shut." Althea stood in the flickering lamplight, her sons asleep in the next chamber. For years she had endured humiliation, buried her rage, swallowed her fear. Now the threads she had spun so carefully at last formed a noose. "Then let us strike," she whispered. The rebellion began with whispers that turned to shouts. Gates opened in the night, welcoming Athenian and Rhodian ships. Nobles declared for the queen, not the king. By the time Damon returned, his army exhausted, the city was already in Althea's hands. The falcon stormed through the gates with what men remained to him, but the people did not cheer. Stones and curses greeted him. From the palace balcony, Althea stood tall, her sons beside her. "Korea belongs not to a butcher," she declared, her voice carrying over the square, "but to the blood of Menandros, and to the people who will no longer live in fear." Damon bellowed, charging the steps, but it was Theon who met him. The boy, no, the young man, leveled his spear as Damon had taught him months before. And with a single thrust, the usurper fell, his crimson cloak darkening with blood. Silence swept the city. Then cheers rose like thunder. Althea closed her eyes, breathing in the sound. She had endured humiliation, betrayal, the murder of innocents. She had worn the mask of a pawn, but at last revealed herself as queen. Later, when the nobles pressed her to take the throne herself, she only shook her head. "No. Theon shall rule when he comes of age. I will guide him, but Korea must see a new dawn, not through a tyrant's grasp, but through a mother's sacrifice." The people called her the Serpent Queen. Not because she was feared, but because she had survived, because she had struck when all hope seemed lost. And so Althea's story ended not as victim, not as pawn, but as the architect of her dynasty's salvation. She had paid in blood, in sorrow, in silence, but she had won. The falcon had soared. But the serpent had waited. And in the end, the serpent had struck.